I'm going to show you how to check your own belly for diastasis recti, and just talk a little bit about why that's important for when you're exercising. So to check your tummy, you need to lay down on your back, knees bent, and then make sure you can feel your whole belly from just under the breastbone there all the way down to the pubic bone. Now just use 2 or 3 fingers and relax the head down and just feel from the top there, right in the middle, all the way down through the belly. And I'm going side to side just to try and feel for the edges of my rectus muscles or my 6-pack tummy muscles. Now, if you're quite weak in your tummy, you may not feel the edges of those muscles at rest, okay? So don't panic. Just get a feel of what's going on there. How firm is that tissue? Is it nice and springy, or can you just sink right into your tummy? Now, the weaker the connective tissue is that joins the 2 halves of those muscles, the more you'll be able to sink your fingers in, and that means the thinner and the weaker that tissue is and the longer it will take to recover. So to check the diastasis, so the size of the gap between the 2 halves of the muscle, I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to press my fingers down gently, and I'm going to just start to lift my head just off the ground. And I want to feel, I'm just moving side to side slightly to feel for the edges of the tummy muscles and come back down. I'm going to come up again. If you can't feel them, you might need to come up a little bit higher, okay? And I want to feel how firm the tissue is, as well as how many fingers I can get in between those 2 halves of the muscle. I'm going to come down lower, around the belly button level, same thing, coming up, just head off the ground, feeling for the distance there, and also for how soft that tissue is and how far I can sink my fingers in. It is common around the belly button to have a softer spot because we've got a weak spot there for our own belly button anyway. Coming down, below the belly button, and this is definitely my weakest spot, so I can push in a lot further down here. Similar size distance between the 2 halves of the muscle, but much softer. So that tells me that that connective tissue down there hasn't recovered as much as my upper section, and that's the part I'll probably need to keep an eye on when I'm doing my abdominal exercises. And then moving right down to just above the pubic bone, and same there, that's quite soft for me. So the implications of this, first of all, are to get a baseline of where you're at before you start exercising. Now, a lot of women say, what exercise should I do for diastasis? Now, that is such a hard question to answer, because all exercises eventually could be okay. You need to start though where you can control that tissue. So for instance, where I've got my soft connective tissue there, if I draw in my pelvic floor muscles and hold them as I then curl my head up, that tissue firms up a lot more for me under my fingertips, okay? It's not doming up like a football, but I can feel that it's tightening more, which is a good sign, okay? So I want to be able to notice what strategy for me makes that connective tissue feel firmer under my fingertips. So for some people, it might be just blowing the air out, okay? And that helps. So usually some kind of combination of pelvic floor, or if we think about the deep abdominal muscle, so the corset style muscle in the tummy, imagining that there's 2 magnets sitting on either hip bone that are gently trying to draw those 2 hip bones together. If you try that and that firms that tissue up, that's another good strategy for you to use. So you need to, I would always start with a really beginner level ab exercise. Now there's lots of examples on the internet. I've got some on my page there and also on my website. So it might be something like a leg lift, trying to maintain that support of either the pelvic floor or the lower tummy or both together, and feeling that you've got that control of the pelvis as well as the abdominal muscles, okay? You can hold that as you move. It might be sliding a leg out. It might be drawing in through that pelvic floor and adding that slight curl up and not noticing any doming, okay? So starting with beginner level, checking how your control is. Can you still breathe? Can you support that softened tissue? Checking that there's no push doming up through there. In some situations we tolerate a little bit of that, but you need to get some advice on that probably. We don't want to see that there's a big doming up through the middle of your tummy as you do something. So you need to change the strategy you're using with your exercise. Now when those beginner level ones become too easy, you can move on to slightly harder. The exercises I always find people progress to too quickly are with both legs up in tabletop, because that is a lot harder to control, and often in that position you're just going to feel like there's a lot of pressure from inside pushing up and you can't really control that well with your muscles. So in that situation, you can have a supported position where you're holding the weight of the legs, and then you can add some movement. Okay, and then when you've got that control and you can hold well without any doming or without holding the breath, then you can move on. So I hope that makes sense. I will, over the weekend, film a few beginner style exercises that I'll pop up next week. But it's really hard to say these are the exercises you should do, because you need to start at the level you're at, and then you need to slowly progress. And the key is to keep progressing at an appropriate level. People get stuck just doing beginner exercises and then they don't move forward, or they push too hard sometimes and they're doing double leg lowers or they're doing full sit-ups, and then they're not getting anywhere anyway because they're just really straining on that weakened tissue. So I hope that helps, and then stay tuned next week as I put up some beginner style exercises.